Today we're going to talk about a time-saving concept for composers, which are templates, how to set them up, and why you should do that. Now, in this video, I'm going to talk about literally every aspect of setting an orchestral template in FL Studio. So we're going to go from here to here, step by step. I'm going to show you how to, route your Kontakt instances to the mixer, how to, route your different MIDI outs to each Kontakt, how to open different patches in a single Kontakt instrument, and how to manage your playlist to look like this, and how mixer subgroups will work and stuff. So we're gonna talk about many things. This video might be like 1 hour long or something like that, because people keep on asking me about this stuff, and I just decided to make a video where I talk about all the things so I can answer to those questions with this video. Now, we should talk first about why you should set up a template in the first place. Templates can save you a lot of time, and they're useful if you compose a certain genre of music over and over. For example, I compose orchestral music multiple times, and even if my songs sometimes they're more hybrid rather than organic, they still have an orchestral foundation most of the time. So I tend to use the same instruments all the time. So in that case, instead of having to open the same instruments all the time, every time we start a new song and go and open a Kontakt interface and open all the MIDI outs, etc., I just created this template, which is like the skeleton of my tracks. It's empty, but it has all the instruments loaded into Kontakt, etc. They are purged, so they take 0 RAM. And we're going to talk about that later, but that's the reason why I use my template, and it saves me time whenever I start a new song from opening all those patches. Now, it's also kind of limiting to always use a template because it enforces the habit of using the same instruments over and over, So you need to be mindful. Sometimes I will start a project from an empty template and build it as I go, because maybe I just want to be more creative. Instead of using all the same instruments all the time, I might start from either an empty template, so something like this, but with empty instances of Kontakt, empty sounds, etc. Or I might start from scratch like this. But if I want to write something orchestral as in my style, I will use this template. So should you always use it? Not necessarily always, but it saves you time if you do. Templates are super tedious to set up because there are lots of things to keep in mind. So this video is going to be very long, and let's get into the first part about this video. So we're going to go here in the empty project, and I'm going to, create a template from scratch and explain you what I'm doing. This video is sponsored by Evenant, an online music academy run by composer of AAA games and movies that explain you how to write modern orchestral music, how to create cinematic synthesis from scratch, how to write trailer music, how to license your music, and how to do all the main things that are going to make it possible for you to have a career as a modern composer. If you're interested in these courses, the link to buy them is in the description of this video. And if you buy them from that link, you're going to give my YouTube channel a lot of help to keep on growing. So, okay, we have our empty project. And the first thing we might want to do is to open an instance of Kontakt. Let's say we want to have a Kontakt of strings. We're going to start from there. So what you're going to do is going to open Kontakt, but the 16-out version, not the normal version. I'm going to mention why the 16-out later, but do open that one. So now you have your Kontakt open, and now what we're going to do is we're going to open the strings. What beginners tend to do is they open us a patch, and they can now play with this patch. And instead of opening another patch in Kontakt, they're just going to open another instance of Kontakt and load another patch. So I don't know, cellos, etc. So they usually do this for every single instrument, and I did that too. I didn't know better, but I discovered just a few weeks after I started using Kontakt that you can load more instruments into it at the same time, and that saves you lots of RAM because you only use one Kontakt instance. So to do that, you just go here and you open another patch, and when you open another patch, it's gonna open it inside the same Kontakt instance. So we have. I'm gonna open a patch for every single sound here. So I'm gonna actually open 2 for it. So we're gonna open 2 basses, 2 cellos, 2 violas. What I'm going to do too is I'm going to purge these patches. Global purge all samples. This saves you a lot of RAM because it removes all the samples from the RAM, and it only loads them when you're playing them. That makes it so that all the various gigabytes of samples you're not using are not loaded into the RAM, so you don't have your resources being used for free without any meaning. I'll talk about this in my video, how to save RAM into Kontakt while using Kontakt. If you want to learn more about purging check out that video. But I do purge all my samples. Now we have 12 different patches opened up in Kontakt. And the problem is that if you play these patches, like if you play this Kontakt instance, it's just gonna play the first one, the basses. So how the hell can you play all the other patches? So what you see here for each patch is output a MIDI channel. This MIDI channel determines which instrument you're playing. Pretty much what you see here, this piano roll, when I play notes here, it's sending MIDI signals to this instance of Kontakt, because this is the instance that is linked to this channel, right? And it sends the signal to the MIDI channel that corresponds to this color, which is MIDI channel 1, which means this D note is going to be read by the instrument which is linked to MIDI channel 1. If I want this to be read by, I don't know, the basses and the violas at the same time, I'm going to go in violas and set this to channel 1. So now they're going to play the same note. But that's not what I want. What I would want is to, you know, draw notes and have some notes being for the basses, other for violas and stuff like that. So one way you can do this is to go here and you can select your channel you want to write for. So it's like press on 6. I'm going to now draw notes of this color which are linked to channel 6. Okay, so now it's playing. If I play 8, it's going to play violins. 12, it's going to be ensemble patches. So you can use colors to write for each instrument, but there is an even smarter way to do this, which is using MIDI Outs. So these guys, pretty much. But there is a new version of this. It's a free plugin called BRSO Articulate, which is much more advanced and also easier to use. I made an entire video about this plugin called BRSO Articulate. The video is called The Best Way to Manage Articulations. I do recommend you to check out that video because I'm not going to talk about all the function of BRSO Articulate. But yeah, you either use the MIDI Out or BRSO Articulate. I recommend to use this one for different reasons. But yeah, so you open this, and this is a way to use all these instruments independently from each other. Because in BRSO Articulate, you can set up the MIDI channel for each instance. So if I set this to, first thing you see is port and channel. Port determines which instrument this, like which channel here, this MIDI signal of this unit are being sent to. So if I want this to communicate with Kontakt, I'm gonna have to set the port here corresponding to the port of Kontakt. To set up a port for Kontakt, I go here in the settings, and in here you see a MIDI input port. I set 0 as an input port, which means if I go on BRSO Articulate and I set 0 as a port, this is now going to communicate to the port which MIDI signals are being sent to Kontakt. So if I press a note here on Articulate, it's going to send a note to Kontakt on the channel which is set up here. So if I send this to channel 1, it's going to play the basses, but if I increase this to, I don't know, 8, it's going to send the signal to Kontakt on channel 8, which corresponds to the first violins. So you can pretty much now split each instrument. And what you do is you go here, Articulate, and you create an instance for each. So I have 2 basses. I'm going to do basses 1. I'm going to clone this, call this basses 2. And this is going to be sent to channel 2. So this plays the first bass patch, this plays the second. I'm going to do this for every single instrument in this Kontakt instance. You know, send this, like open different clones here, set them up, set the channels for each. So that's what I'm going to do now. All right, I set up my instances of BRSO Articulate. So each one now is linked to a different instrument. And now I'm able to control all these instruments from the same instance of Kontakt, but from different channels. This saves you lots of RAM and CPU because you're only using one instance of Kontakt for multiple patches. So that's a great way to set up Kontakt, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. Now, the second reason why you should set up instrument this way is because of MIDI control commands such as expression and MIDI CC, and modulation. So if you want to do stuff like this, for example, you know, where you do this sort of rising and falling, you can do this with the mod wheel. The mod wheel is a parameter I mention in every single one of my orchestral videos. It's very important to determine how soft or hard an instrument is playing and stuff like that. You also have the expression, which is like a volume control, you know. The cool thing is that if you're using BRSO Articulate, expression and dynamics, you know, are already set up, you know, in the patch. Now, the reason why it's good to use BRSO is that each one has, like, each instance is gonna provide you with MIDI control commands, and you can, you know, write for each independently from the other. So I can do this for, you know, first violins, sorry, for the strings ensemble, and on the first violins I might do something else, you know. You know, well, if I used only, like, if I only used the instance of Kontakt, like the Kontakt channel to write for the strings, I could have done that by using these colors. But when it came to, like, if I had to tweak the mod wheel and stuff like this, it would have been very troublesome. So another reason why you should use MIDI control commands is to use another reason why you should use the MIDI outs and BRSO Articulate is to use the MIDI control command and, you know, treat them separately from each other. Now, one thing you might notice though is even if you have your Kontakt set up like this and you have all the channels splitted like this, if I link this Kontakt to a mixer insert, I'm gonna link it here. Now, this Kontakt called strings is gonna be here, and whatever string I'm gonna play though, it's gonna be on the same mixer track. Now, say I want to mix the cellos independently from the basses and independently from the violas, so I want to split all of this into different mixer tracks. How do you do this? There's a way to do this, and it's a bit complicated to set up. I think I remember it correctly. It's one thing that once you set it up, you don't have to do it again. But yeah, I'm gonna try to remember how I did it. So that's why I meant, like, the reason why I mentioned to open the 16-out version of Kontakt is this one, because if you go here on Kontakt and you go click on outputs and you open the 16-out version, you're gonna have 16 mixer outputs inside your Kontakt patch, pretty much. These are useful because they are necessary to route like your Kontakt instruments into different mixer tracks in whatever DAW you're using. So let's say, for example, we want to route the basses differently from the cellos, stuff like that. If we have our output set up, that means we can go here, and on each patch there is an output, you know, label. If you press here, it's gonna let you select which output to assign to each instrument. So I'm gonna assign the basses to the first output, the cellos to the second output, the violas to the third, and etc., etc. So now each instrument has its own output. So if I play the violins, you see they're being sent to this output. If I play the cellos, they're sent to this other output. If you check out the mixer though, all the different outputs are still being sent to the same mixer track. So inside Kontakt, the signal is being splitted, but once it exits Kontakt, it's still being, you know, grouped into one single signal. The way to send each output instead to a different mixer track is this. You go here on the settings, you go on the wrapper settings, processing, and this here in connections, you're gonna see all the active outputs in Kontakt. Now, we can set each one of these to a different mixer track, starting from this one. So if you press on auto map outputs, it's gonna do it for you. It's gonna send the first output to channel 5, the second output to channel 5 plus 1, so channel 6, the third to channel 5 plus 2, and what you want to have is pretty much the outputs being sent to different mixer tracks progressively. So if I play this, you know, output 1, the basses which are on output 1, the signal is gonna be sent here. If I play the cellos which are on output 2, it's gonna be sent to the channel after. If I play the violins, you know. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna rename these basses, these cellos. Okay, so now each one is being routed to a different mixer track because we set up the outputs inside and we send each output to a different MIDI track. Now I could even send an output much more far away, like if I sent this to, I don't know, 10, it's gonna send the second violins very much far away, like 10 tracks more far than track 5, sort of. But yeah, I prefer to use like this in a progressive way. It's easier to track of where things are going. And now whenever I'm going to change the output here of an instrument, it's going to change where it's going to be sent to the mixer, you know, because of the routing we did. Now, the cool thing is that you can now save this as your template. You know, you save this as a project file. If you do, like if you save this in the templates folder called template, I'm going to call this strings template. It's going to save the thing. And now if we want to open the template again, we go here in FL Studio, new from template, and there should be strings template. There it is. So if we open this, we're going to have that instance of Kontakt already set up, the mixer already set up, and stuff like that. So it's going to save us the trouble of having to reopen all the things and redo all the routing and stuff like this. Now, this was just how to set up Kontakt. There's more to talk about. So we have our string instrument. Ideally, what you do is you do this for every single instrument. So I would open another patch of Kontakt, and I don't need to load the strings in this case because I just want to add other instruments. So say I want to do something like this with brass. I go here, call this brass. I make sure to change the port because this is another, like we don't want to, with these channels to control these instances. This is another instance. I'm going to open all the brass instruments I want to, and I'm going to redo the thing where I open an instance of BRSO articulate for each instrument. I'm going to change the port to 1, and the channels are still going to be the same thing, channel 1, 2, 3, etc., until I reach the limit of my instruments. I'm going to route each brass instrument differently, etc., etc., and I'm going to link them to the mixer. I'm going to change the color to something else, orange. I'm going to do this. Route it here, call it brass, and then I'm going to open the brass instruments, which I'm not going to do in this video, but to do that, you're just going to have to replicate the step we did before for the strings. So at the end, I might have many instruments. Now, when it comes to mixing these instruments, what I like to do is to use groups. So if you have an orchestral template, you're going to have a mixer which is full of stuff, and when you have lots of channels like that, it might be a bit difficult to mix these instruments together unless you use subgroups. This is something I mentioned in my mixing tutorial already, like the mixer routing tutorial, so I'm not going to go in depth as much as I did in that tutorial. But this is a critical step, especially for reverb. So one thing I do is I group my instruments. So we have all the string instruments here, and each one is being sent to a different output, right? One thing you can do is to go here, call this, strings group. I'm going to give it the same color as those guys. And what you can do is to select this, control or left click, it's going to select all of them. Then you press control shift, click on this one. And if you right click on this one, go on track routing and do route selected to this track only. It's going to send all of this. You can see the wire here. These channels are being sent to this one. They're not being sent to the master, which means these channels, these mixer tracks, are going to be sent here, and then the signal that goes into here is going to then be sent to the master. So you're going to see it, twice the signal, but it's actually the same signal just traveling through the wire. Another way in which you could have done this is you could have gone here, click on this arrow, and it's going to send the signal, and you need to remove it from here too, because otherwise you're going to have double the signal. Twice, that's not very good. So routing the violas to strings, and you do this, like the way to do this for each instrument, go and do it like this as I showed you. Route to this track only, and now all these tracks are being sent to the strings group. So whatever, like if I want to EQ all the strings at the same time, I'm just going to have to put an EQ on the strings group. It's going to affect all the strings, because all this signal is being sent here. But I still can mix this independently from each other, because say I want to EQ the second violin's differently from the cellos, I can go in the second violin's mixer track and on the cello mixer track and do my own adjustments. But their adjusted version is going to be sent to the strings group, on which I can do even more adjustments for the whole group, So this gives you both the freedom to tweak all the strings at the same time, but also tweak them independently from each other. This is called, bussing, sub buses, group buses, stuff like that. When people talk about buses, they talk about this, big channels that contain different signal from many other channels, stuff like that. Now, another reason why I do this is because of reverb. So, reverb. There's multiple ways of using reverb. Some people might use it by using it, on the master. They just set up the reverb, 13%, whatever they want, and this affects all the sounds that are being sent to this master channel in the same exact way, because all the signal is going to be sent to this reverb, which is the same for it's going to be the same for every single instrument. So if you do it like this, you're going to use, an equivalent amount of reverb on every single instrument. That is not, doesn't give you lots of freedom, though, You might not want lots of reverb on some instruments like percussion. It's best if they don't have lots of reverb and stuff like that. So one way in which you can use reverb for each instrument, say I have a brass group here. I didn't open my brass, but let's say, for example, I did. So I'm going to do something like this. So we have these two groups, right? One is for the brass, one is for the strings. Say I want to have different reverb for each. One way in which you can do this is to open a reverb instance for each. You go here on the strings group and I open an instance of Valhalla Room and I set it up just like I want to for my strings. Now, this is not a reverb tutorial. If you want to learn how reverb works, check out my reverb tutorial I made a few years ago. And yeah, I have this instance of reverb on the strings group, which means all the instruments on the strings are going to be affected by it. Now, this means I can set up my reverb for strings independently from the brass, because if I go on the brass and then open another instance of Valhalla Room, I can set this one up differently, And that gives me the freedom to set up a different reverb for each. This, you can do it like this. This can be heavy though, because each reverb unit is going to consume quite some amount of CPU. So what I like to do is to create, another bus, which I'm going to call reverb. And I'm going to send this, I'm going to dock it to the right. Usually I do it like this. And reverb is going to contain a unit of Valhalla Room set to 100% wet, which means that whatever signal is being sent here is going to be fully reverbed, entirely. It's not going to have dry signal. I mentioned this in the reverb tutorial. If you want to learn more about that, check out the reverb tutorial. Now, we have this. What we're going to do is I'm going to use this as a send. Sends are, just when you send zero signal to some other channel. So I'm going to go on the strings track that I created here. This strings track contains the dry signal of the strings without reverb. But if I want to add some reverb to it, I'm going to go here, route this here, and this allows you to set up how much loud you want the signal that is sent here to be. So what I'm going to do, if I want to add more reverb to the strings, I'm just going to increase this slide here, this knob here, because this is pretty much the wet signal of the strings now, because all the signal that is being sent from here is being reverb 100%. So the output of this, which is going to be sent to the master, is going to be, the reverb signal of the strings. If I remove here, what we're hearing is the signal of the strings, which is being sent here. It's being processed by the reverb, and it's being sent again to the master. Now, if I want to have more or less reverb on my strings, I'm going to tweak this too. So this determines how much, reverberated the string signal is being set to, I'm going to have. And this instead is the dry signal. So if I want my string to sound more reverb than dry, more distant than far, I'm going to go here and I'm going to send more string signal to the reverb than to the master. It's going to make them sound more distant. But if I want the strings to be more dry, I'm going to send way more signal to the master compared to the reverb send. Now, this is useful because I can then do the same thing with the brass. I have the brass which is being sent to the master, but I can send it to the reverb. I'm going to do another, again, I'm going to send a bit of them to the reverb. And the more reverb you add, the more distant they're going to sound and stuff like that. But they are still being processed by the same unit of Valhalla Room. So this is a way of using your reverb by only using one instance, but using it differently. There's a different ratio of dry and wet for the strings compared then to the ratio of dry and wet brass, So with this send technology, you can just decide, hey, I want the brass to be reverb like hell, but I want the strings to be more dry, so I'm gonna send more signal to the master and less to the reverb in the strings. And I'm gonna, send more brass. So you have the freedom to just do whatever you like. So I do this for every single of my instruments, and I do it in an advanced way where I use this thing here. But if you want to learn about my way of using reverb in depth, I made a tutorial about that. It's like 30 minutes long. I cannot explain that now. So check out the tutorial. But this is called, this thing I explained you here with the sends is called, I think, parallel reverb. And what I do is I have, usually, one reverb sound I called orchestral reverb, then I have percussive reverb, and in percussive reverb, I have another unit of Valhalla room, and it's tweaked a bit differently because I want my percussion to have a different sort of reverb. And I send all my percussion patches, like my percussion group, to that one send. Instead of sending them to the reverb, here, the orchestral reverb, I send them to the percussive reverb, and I tweak this one differently. And another cool thing that you can do with parallel reverb, set like this, you can pretty much EQ the signal of the reverb independently from the dry signal. So say, for example, I have my string signal. A part of it is being sent to the master completely dry, and a part of it is being sent here before being sent to the master. What I can do is I go on the part that is being sent to the reverb, like here, and I can, apply a low-pass filter on the reverb signal, so the reflections of my strings have less low information, like low frequencies. But this is leaving the actual string signal untouched, because the dry signal is being sent here directly. So you can do quite some crazy things. And that's pretty much how I set up my mixers. It's a bit confusing to explain, but I hope you understood. And if you want to learn more about reverb, check out the reverb tutorial. It's much more in depth, much more slower paced, and explains things way better than I did now. So now we have our channel set up. We have our reverb set up. Let's talk about how to set up your playlist. Now, when it comes to the playlist, FL Studio is very, very flexible. There is really no need to really set up your template in a strict way like I do. I just do it because my tracks get very cluttered with stuff, and I want to have an idea where things are. So the way I keep track of where each instrument is first color coding. You might have seen my projects. My strings are always violet. My brass is always orange. I do that because that helps me understand where things are in the mixer. Like the mixer can get very crowded, and that's why you should label each thing. Because if you don't, it's gonna be a mess to find out where in the mixer the shallows are and stuff like that. So the first thing you want to do is to label everything, and to color too. That helps too. And so I have my color coding: orange brass, yellow is percussion, violet is for strings, blue is for choir, and there's light blue is for woodwinds, stuff like that. You might want to use your own, but I do recommend to use one color coding scheme for you to understand where everything is. Now, I use that color scheme everywhere. I use it in the channels, I use it in the mixer, and I also use it in the playlist. What I do is I go here, usually I call this, strings ensemble. No, I'm gonna call this basses. And I'm gonna color this just like I colored the basses here. All these shallows, violas, etc. You can even, add images to this if you want to. I don't usually do that, but if you can. Now you have we have these tracks that are named after the instruments. I can then go and create one patch called first violins, in which I'm gonna write only for first violins, but that's reducing FL Studio's freedom, because you can do whatever you want in this DAW. You don't have to do this. I just do this to keep track of everything. So yeah. Now, if you want to group this, this playlist tracks, you can right-click on one and do group with above track. It's gonna group it with the above track. I do this for every single track of the strings. This makes it so that if I press Alt on my keyboard, Alt left click on one of this, it's gonna mute all of them. Or Alt right click, it's gonna solo all of them. This is useful because maybe you have a full composition and just want to hear the strings. Alt right click and it isolates the strings. That's very nice, and that's what I do. And you can also close them all together, stuff like that. So it's very useful to group them. if you want to do that. Now, I do this for every single instrument. So in my template, you might see the strings grouped like this, the brass grouped like this, and stuff like that. It also helps if you want to move a group up and down. If you move one, it's gonna move the whole thing. So it just makes it easier for you to tweak and set your playlist here on FL Studio. But you can even just not do this because it can be limiting sometimes. FL Studio's workflow is way more flexible than this. It's not supposed to be used in such a strict way. I just personally like to use it this way. Now, if you do all the steps I mentioned in the first part of the video, for each instrument you use, at the end of it, you might have something that looks like this. And it's pretty much all that I explained. Now, you might notice that I did use the icons. Yeah, I do use the icons. I forgot. And each instrument here also has like a short name after it, like basis 1 ARC, basis 2 FLS, basis 3 CS2. This refers, in my case, I used it to refer to the library that these things are, these patches belong to. CS2 is Cinematic Strings 2, ARC is Metropolis ARC 1, FLS is Fluid Shorts from performance samples, and CBR is like Century Brass, stuff like that. So I use this to remind me of which library, because each library has a different sound. When your template starts to be very big, you might want to do that. Another thing that I forgot to mention is that I have a few empty Kontakt patches called Extra. I leave this because in my tracks, sometimes I might want to use particular instruments that I don't use in all tracks. So I leave a few open Kontakt instances, and it's like they're already set up though. Like this channel, this is set to port 7, and each of these is port 7, channel 1, 2, 3, etc. So it's the same thing. And there's also I also left some space in the mixer for each. So you might want to leave some empty instances. And another thing you definitely need to do is to use the purge function if you have a full template like this, because it doesn't make sense to not use it. Like it's gonna make it super heavy and almost unreadable for your computer if you don't use the purge function. So definitely use the purge function on your templates. Now, once you have your template, you go here, you save it as I showed you before. I call this Orchestral template 7 because I made freaking 7 versions of this. And one thing you can do other than the template file, you can create sort of like a text file .nfo, and you can write the description of the template, and you can assign a menu icon to the template. So when you go in your FL Studio, if you go in your template menu, you're going to see the name of the template, the description, and the icon you set up for it. You save it in the template folder, and if you open FL Studio with this template and close it, next time you open it, it's going to open this template automatically. So that's how it works. So yeah, that's pretty much the whole how to set up your template in FL Studio. And I think there isn't anything else to say. Other than other than setting up the template like this, I also set up each instance of BRSO Articulate to have articulations linked to each color. This is something I'm not going to explain you how to do it here, but it allows you to change articulation depending on which color you're using in the channel, in the piano roll. I mentioned how to do this in the best way to manage orchestral articulation tutorial, which talks about BRSO Articulate. But you can also check it out, like BRSO Articulate, you can buy it. You can download it for free. You type it into Google, you're gonna find the homepage of this plugin. It's downloadable for free. And on the homepage, there is a whole, a wall of text that explains you how to set this up. So do check it out. And that's pretty much it for my template. Since this was a very long video and then was a very packed subject, I might have forgot something. So if you have questions, let me know in the comments. And as usual, if this helped you, share it with a friend. Subscribe if you're new here. Check out the rest of the tutorials on this channel where I do explain how to write actual orchestral music other than setting up your templates. And yeah, if you want to keep on seeing this channel growing and want to keep on seeing me making videos, consider supporting me over Patreon, where you can get lots of rewards back as a thank you for your kind support. And thank you for the guys who are supporting me now on Patreon, which are making it able for me to keep on making these videos. So that's it for this one. I hope you enjoyed it and it taught you something valuable. I'm gonna see you next week with a new tutorial. Bye.